Hi, welcome back to our channel, Books Don't Review Themselves. I'm Jessica.
And I'm Kim.
And today we want to talk about our top 5 books of 2019. I have 7 books, so I couldn't narrow it down, so I will mention my number 7 and my number 6, and then we'll go descending order. So my number 7 book was Someone Knows by Lisa Scottoline. My number 6 book was The Stranger on the Beach by Michelle Campbell. So that was my 7 and my 6.
And for both of those, we have reviews up on
Yes.
Books Don't Review Themselves,
Yes.
the website.
And we even have a whole podcast talking about Stranger on the Beach. So what was your number 5?
My number 5, and this was actually the last book I read, is Love Lettering by Kate Claiborne.
Is that the romancy one?
It is the romancy one. I was surprised by it because I've read plenty of romance in the past, and I guess I just pick up a different type of romance than normal because my romance, they're more dirty. And, it's like J.R. Ward's Black Brother Daggerhood or like Laurel K. Hamilton's vampire books, and stuff, and Anita Blake series. So I was just getting bored, I guess, with the romance because it was tons of sex, which is fine. And with most romance books, when I read them, so I can write the review, I for sure read like the first sex scene to see how the author does, and then sex scenes further along, I'll skim them because I'm like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
But with this one, it was a sweeter romance, but there's still like one main sex scene. And she did like an excellent job. It was hot, but it was also sweet and tender. And like in this book, I actually wish there was some more sex scenes because it was nice and it added to the story. The other thing that I really enjoyed about this was the characters, the development. Normally it's just the 2 main characters, and that's who the author focused on. But this one, there was like 6 different characters and they each felt fleshed out and really authentic and really good. And she tackles, the problems that faces society today. So it was just, I enjoyed it. And it made me say, oh, maybe I will give some more romance books a chance again. And I just need to find a different style of romance than the ones
trashy,
than I had been
dirty.
reading. Those are fine. Maybe like one every couple months or something. But
Right. And I think the problem with romance, I think it has a stigma because people think of like Harlequin, is that the right word? Harlequin novels or like those trashy, dirty. And it's like, those are fine, but that's not the only like subgenre of romance. You know what I mean? Like there are other books that are, like you said, more intimate and more like realistic.
Yeah.
In the sense where it's not like reading a porno.
Yeah. And I mean, I enjoy reading pornos too, but I just, they all felt the same. And the biggest thing too with those type of books, and I mean, it had a little bit of this in here too. Does he love me? Do I love him? I can't tell him I love him first, or they hate each other. And then it just keeps going on and on and on. And it's like, life is annoying enough and people have enough horrible problems. Why do you want to read about people who aren't treating each other well,
And I think the other thing with romance is some of the sex seems like forced.
Yeah.
Like they're just trying to be like get you to blush and be like, oh my God. And sometimes it's okay once in a while, but
that's why I like this one. Because like I said, it was sweet and tender, but it was still
genuine and
hot. Yeah.
Yep.
So yes, so Love Lettering by Kate Claiborne is my number 5 pick for 2019.
My number 5 pick for 2019 is The Stranger Inside by Lisa Unger. I have read a couple of her books. The book was really interesting to me, like how it was written, because I listened to this book and it goes kind of back and forth. And I wouldn't say back and forth, but it goes from Tess and friend Hank. It kind of goes back from an incident that happened in their childhood. And it talks about it. There's back and forth between them now as an adult and as what they went through in their childhood. It's like sometimes it seemed like it was them, their younger selves talking, but sometimes it also seemed like it was their adult selves reflecting on the younger self situation. The situation was very interesting. I just thought it was very unique because it is a thriller, and I did not see the twist coming. I just thought it was really well written, and it's not like some of her other books. I would definitely recommend it if you enjoy thrillers. There is, like, you know, some trigger warnings with, like, I don't want to say sexual assault, but because it's not, you're left to kind of assume that.
Okay.
You know, so there is some of that in there, but it's just very interesting to see Tessa, Hank, and then Rain, who kind of changed her identity as she went into adulthood to try to distance herself from what happened to her.
Okay.
And so I just thought it was really, really good. It was a good thriller. That's where I seen this year a lot of my thrillers weren't as thrilling.
Mm-hmm.
So this was one that I felt was really good.
Excellent. My number 4 pick, and I have 2 different ones, but I have a main one, but I'm going to talk about another one too, is Mulberry Mischief by Sharon Farrow. I read a lot of cozy mysteries, and, you know, after a while, they're all different, because obviously they take place in different towns, and they have different occupations and different characters. But if you read a bunch in a row, it can, like any book, you're just like, eh. So when I read this one, first of all, it's a Halloween cozy, which I love Halloween. But this one amused me because a lot of times cozies, you know, are super sweet. You have, you know, your one bad character, 2 bad characters. But this one, like almost all of the characters who could have possibly done the murder were just evil people. And you don't see that a lot in cozies. And that just made me love it. You know, it made me... I hadn't stopped reading cozies, but I was kind of like, you know. But this one, when I read this one, I'm just like, okay, I can get back into it, and, you know, I can find some amusing stuff. So this is my number 4th pick. And kind of to go off of that a little bit, Cast Iron Alibi by Victoria Hamilton is number 9 in Vintage Kitchen Mystery Series. And this is the first one I've read of the series, but she does a good job, you know, so you're not confused or lost or anything with the characters. But the reason why this one I'm kind of putting in with Mulberry Mischief is this one was more up to date, it felt to me, with the times. Because people were sexting, and, like, a group of girlfriends got together for, like, a week in the summer to go camping. And one of the people pretty much set up it in a way that she would be able to hook up with a guy during this vacation. And that's just not normal in cozies, you know?
Right.
They'll allude to having sex. They'll kiss, and then it'll be the next morning, you know? And this one, I mean, there was, like, dick pics. And so I'm just like, well, then. So I was amused by that. And the other thing, too, is, like, when it comes to swearing in cozies, maybe they'll say one hell or a damn, but usually not. But you might get that. But with this one, she didn't swear, but she said frick. And she said it twice, or one of the characters did. So I'm just like, okay, that's pretty close to fuck. And we know it's not, but, you know, it felt like another step towards this time.
Yeah.
You know, which I liked. Lots of people love cozies because they are sweet and innocent, and that's why one of the reasons I enjoy them too. But, you know, these two were just a little bit more naughty and a little bit more with 2019. So I enjoyed those ones.
So my number 4 is An Anonymous Girl by Greer Hendricks and Sarah Buchanan. This book, I feel like there's not a whole lot I can say about it without, like, kind of giving it away, but basically it's a psychological thriller. Jess basically takes the place of somebody in this study.
Okay.
An ethics study. So, like, in the book synopsis, it says...
So that's not very ethical to take someone else's place.
Yes. So it says, seeking women ages 18 through 32 to participate in a study on ethics and morality, generous compensation, anonymity guaranteed. And so it kind of goes... Basically, a story unfolds with that, with her going to this study. This book left me... like, wow. Like, it was one of the books this year that I read, and I was like, oh my god, that was so good. And I immediately went out and bought their other book.
Oh.
And it's not tied to this book, but just, again, their other book, I think it's called The Wife Between Us.
Okay.
And it looks like they have another book coming out that we have on our list. I thought this book was so well done. It's a psychological thriller. I think I listened to this one as well.
So
it was excellent.
What are the names again?
Greer Hendricks and Sarah Buchanan.
So are they husband and wife? Are they just friends?
I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
And they wrote obviously well together. You couldn't see like changes, like Greer did this one and she did that one.
Yeah, but when I told my mother-in-law about this book, she read it, loved it, read The Wife Between Us, and loved that too.
Okay.
So
I'll have to read. Well, I guess if we're reading that other one later on this year, but
yeah. So that one I just thought was excellent.
What was the title of the one you're going to read?
It is You Are Not Alone.
Okay. My number 3 is one that I know you did not enjoy much, but I did. It's The 10,000 Doors of January.
I knew I was going to make your list.
By Alex E. Harrow. I love fantasy books. I like epic fantasy. I like all types of fantasy. So when we chose this one, I was very excited. To me, once again, we have the written review up on our website, and we also did a podcast for it too. So they're both up on the website. If you want to, I won't go far into detail, so you can watch those or read it. But the biggest reason why I enjoyed this book is it was just a fun escape into a land that I thought was very well written. And then my other biggest thing was it felt like a love letter to readers. It was just, normally I do not enjoy lots of poetical writing or lyrical writing. You know, I will skim if it gets too flowery. But this, it was a more flowery book in many parts. But I read it all, like word for word. And I don't often reread books because there are so many books out in the world that I don't have time to reread. But I could see myself, like in 5 years, possibly rereading this one. So that's my number 3.
So my number 3 is a totally different direction.
Oh my gosh.
I chose What Happened That Night by Deanna Cameron. This book, and I said this with the last book, but this book like really left me floored.
And this was a young adult book.
Yes, it was a young adult book. It was so phenomenally written. And
this was her debut as well.
Yes, it was her debut, and she's young.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
and didn't she write it on like some, I don't remember which website, but she'd put
Wattpad.
up like Wattpad. She put up like a chapter at a time or whatever.
Yeah, it was so well done.
Mm-hmm.
It was so realistic, and there were so many things that you did not see coming.
Mm-hmm.
So many things. It was just so good. I had a book hangover after that book for a while, where it was just like everything I read, you know, you don't want to compare it, but it's the feeling that that book gave when I finished it. It was like I was longing for that feeling, and it took a while before something came around and gave me that. But it was so good, and I was not like, I remember picking it, and when we read the synopsis, it was like, oh, this sounds good, but, you know, we'll see. And one of our big things was we wanted to read a YA. So we're like, sounds good, it's a YA. And I was just shocked. It was not what I was expecting, so it was so good.
And there's trigger warnings with that one, too. Yes,
there's several trigger warnings. We did do a podcast about it. Might be one of our longest.
Yeah.
But there are trigger warnings. I think we mentioned that in the podcast that we did. So go check that out if you want more details and spoilers.
Mm-hmm. My number 2 is The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. I'm not sure how you say his last name, but yeah, after we record this, we're actually going to record the podcast for The Silent Patient. You read it like months ago and you kept talking about it. So finally I read it and I was wowed by it. And the biggest reason why I was wowed was the ending. It was just, I did not expect it at all. And after I read it, I'm like, oh, okay. And every time I talk about it, I want to say what it's like. But if I say it, then you might kind of get the ending more so. So when we do the podcast, I'll say it in the spoilers part. But the other reason why I enjoyed it, besides the phenomenal ending, I mean, that was just awesome, was, you know, with 2019 and, you know, a few years back, you know, the Me Too movement and all that stuff, and people, you know, talking more about gaslighting and, you know, mental health issues. He just does this really well. And the fact that it's a man talking about, you know, gaslighting a woman and stuff, I really appreciated that. Mm-hmm. So, yep, that's my number 2, The Silent Patient.
My number 2 is Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. Mm-hmm. I spent my entire 4th of July reading that book, and It's kind of the first of its kind that I've read like that. I did not see a lot of the things coming. It was so twisted and dark, and it was just so, like, it's something that I feel like I would reread because I just enjoyed it so much. And it was, like I said, I don't have a lot of experience with gothic thrillers and horror, and so just, like, the setting of it. I went to New York about 2 years ago, I think, and I loved it. Like, I've been to Seattle and I've been to New York, and I thought I would love Seattle, but I enjoyed Seattle. I was only there for like 24 hours, so I didn't actually get to like do touristy things. But when I was in New York, and we were, again, only there for the day, I loved New York. I loved the lights and the buildings and like just like seeing like these. I loved it. The subway, even though it's gross and grimy, it was like, oh my God, I'm on a subway. You know what I mean? Like,
that'll get old fast.
Yeah, and like, that was one of the conversations I had with my friend when we were coming home. We were on the train to get back into New Jersey, and there were like businessmen going home, and it was like 8 o'clock at night. And I'm like, that would suck. Because a lot of these people live in New Jersey, take a train into New York, then take a subway to where they need to be. But something about New York, man, I loved it. Loved it. So having that setting in New York at the Bartholomew, and having that like dark gothic-y hotel. I could just see it. I could see the gargoyles and whatever, and it was, I don't know, I really enjoyed it. And we read that one, and then we read
Ruth Ware's.
Is like Turn of the Key, which I think is probably my favorite book that she's done.
Yeah,
for sure.
I agree.
That also kind of has that gothic-y vibe to it. That's my number 2.
It's so funny because we are so different in so many ways. New York, I have no desire ever to go there. I don't like crowds of people.
I don't either. So that's why I was very surprised.
My other biggest thing, I don't like smells, and New York reeks. It is a smelly town. I mean, so no on that. And then the only reason why I would want to go there is like to see Broadway shows. Mm-hmm. Like I would want to go for a destination, which would be fine. I wouldn't even want to go there to do shopping because I'm like, nope, I'm good.
See, and we went to a few stores. You know, we went to like seeing Trump Tower, like, and it's all like marble. Mm-hmm. And then Starbucks was crazy.
No.
It was just, it was an experience. To live there every day, I couldn't do it.
That's why I can see so many people why New Yorkers are, they always say New Yorkers are such mean people. I mean, I can see that.
You have to be to
you can't be like, oh, pardon me, excuse me. And
I'm just like, something about it is so magical when you visit. Obviously, if you live there, I don't know if it's less magical. Probably is. But, so, that's my little tangent.
Right. Excellent. My number 1 is The Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo.
Oh, I haven't read it yet.
Jessica.
I know. Everyone keeps talking about it.
I think you'll enjoy it, but I don't think it will be one that you love because it's a fantasy book. It does have elements of Harry Potter, but it's different than Harry Potter, so that might endear you more to it. Mm-hmm. It reminds me more of The Magicians, which it's a book by Lev Grossman is the author, and there's 3 of them, I think, and then it's also a TV show as well. And the new season just came up on Netflix or Hulu or something, so I watched one yesterday. I'm like, I like to savor it to draw them out. But so it reminded me of that. It was another fantasy book with witches and magic, and that is my catnip. And I think she did a wonderful job. I hope the series will continue because it was book 1, and I don't remember the name of the series. I'm already looking forward to number 2. And like I said before, with the 10,000 Doors of January, I could see myself rereading it in 5 years down the road. This one, I could see myself rereading it possibly after the series is done. And waiting 5 or 10 years, but not as quickly as the other book. So I don't know, but I loved it, and read it if you like fantasy or witches or magic, and yeah,
I'm really excited for that one. My number 1 is
dun, dun, dun.
The Silent Patient, and I think we saw that coming.
Because you talked about it repeatedly. But it's a good book. It's a good book.
And the thing about The Silent Patient is I saw it everywhere, And I'm like, oh my God, it's probably not even that good. Because it's like,
Unput-it-downable.
Yeah. It's like some of those award shows. What am I thinking of? Is it the Grammys? Or the Oscars? I can't remember. It might be the Oscars where it's like, most of the time you don't know the fucking movies or, I don't know the producers and I don't watch the Oscars because I don't care.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of
And then
indie.
later on when you do watch the movies, like if you watch the winner, you're like, what was that shit show? Like The Birdman, I think that's the title of it, was one, and we watched it and I'm like, dear God, this is horrible.
Yeah, and it's like these indie films and whatever, and that's fine, but most of the time, like you said, you end up watching it and you're like,
that was shit.
Yeah, I don't understand the hype. So, that being said, I saw The Silent Patient everywhere. And
the cover
is not great.
It's not. It's pretty basic.
Yeah, it's a basic cover.
Yeah.
Something about it just kind of turned me off where I'm like, I don't think I'm going to like this. I think the hype is probably, it's overhyped, whatever. Yeah. Finally, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do it. And I listened to it. Normally, I can listen to, like, a couple of books at a time. And I found myself, like, not listening to my other books and just going towards this one because I wanted to know what happened. And I had a couple theories and whatever. And then it was so good. And it's that the psychological thrillers, like, a thriller is like my catnip. But a psychological thriller, like a good psychological thriller, nothing better. It was a total mind fuck. And, I mean, I don't want to say too much because we'll talk about it in our other podcast that we have coming out with talking about it. But yes, it was my number one. I think it's the number one thriller on Goodreads. And I think it's definitely well-deserved. And this one is worth the hype, and I would definitely recommend it.
When you're talking about, like, you just mainly listened to this one, you didn't listen to your 3 or 4 other books, it made me laugh a little because I was reading an article, like, the 5 ways to read more books in 2020, and, like, number 3 of their ideas was to only read or listen to one book at a time. That way you can, like, just focus on that and get through it. And, and I'm like... When I read that, I thought of you because I know you always listen to, like,
and that's actually something that I was thinking about too, because I'm like, I want to get through more books, and for whatever reason lately, it's like I've had a hard time getting through. I feel like I can't sit down and read like I used to, like, without, like, falling asleep or, whatever. And so that's something I really want to, like, dedicate, like, time in my day every day. In the past, I could read a book in, like, 2 days, instead of dragging it out over. But then it's like I get bored with whatever, and then I start reading another book, and then this one has, like, 13%, and this one has, like, 12%, and then I have, like, a book that has, like, 4 chapters in, and then I stress myself out because I'm like, oh my God, but I want to read them all, and it's like I just need to read one at a time and dedicate, like, time to that book.
And then it also takes you time to, like, get back into the story too. You're like, you have to think a little bit before you get back into it.
Right. And that's the other thing. It's not, to me, it doesn't seem as big of a deal with audiobooks per se, but it kind of depends. Like, I try to keep, like, I always have, like, 3 to 4 almost downloaded at a time on my phone, but I'll try to listen through one and then delete it and then go on to the next. Unless I really can't get into it, then it's like I'll take a break and whatnot.
And for me, I used to read like 3 or 4 books at a time, but I just stopped. And the biggest reason why I stopped doing that is because I know I needed to write the reviews, so I needed to focus on that book. So then I'd read the book, write the review, and go on to the next one. Otherwise, sometimes I don't. Sometimes the reviews linger a little bit, but I find that if I do let them linger a little bit, and if I read a book or 2 books in between, it's harder for me to write the review.
Right. And that's, I totally agree, and that's something I'm going to be working on 2020 is my review, guys, because we all know I'm not great at writing them. But yeah, I'm hoping that, like, focusing on one book at a time will help, which is kind of funny because I was actually just talking to my cousin Morgan about it, and she reads only one book at a time, and I'm like, what? And she's like, no, I do. She's like, I can't read more. But she was telling me, I think she's doing some sort of challenge or something, which is going to require her to read like 2 or 3 books at a time or something. So she's like, we'll see how I do at that. But I was so shocked that she reads like only one book at a time.
It makes sense, though, for the genre. She likes a lot of fantasy.
Yes.
And that, I mean, if you have 3 different fantasy worlds going on, no, it's
and
hard.
I always say, it's intimidating to me when I open up a fantasy book and there's a map, because I don't know, the crazy in me wants to be like, oh my God, am I going to remember this country? Do I need to remember all these names? Like, is this important? Like, is this going to screw up with the book or whatever?
I think it's like a requirement for fantasy books to have a map in it. That's just like a requirement.
So I think that's the other thing too, is I want to read a little more fantasy in the upcoming year, because like Harry Potter has been so near and dear to my heart since I was like 9 years old. I know these aren't great examples, but like Harry Potter and like Twilight.
Twilight.
Yeah, like I really enjoyed Twilight.
It was a good series.
You know, when I watched the movies and stuff, but I just remember like myself in my room reading that book and my dad ruining that book for me.
How did he ruin it?
Oh my God.
Did he tell you the ending or what?
Yes.
Oh,
so
rude.
this is a funny story, because my dad is not like a reader. He doesn't read that kind of book. And my aunt does, his sister.
Okay.
And so they must have been talking or something, and she was like telling him like, oh my God, about this book, and was like, yeah, I'm sure Jessica's probably reading it, because I'm a big reader. And I was sitting at the kitchen table, like eating or something, and I don't know if I was on the last book, but I was on like something major happening in Twilight. And I think it was when you find out that Jacob imprints Bella's baby.
Yeah.
And so my dad's asking me these questions like, oh, have you read Twilight? Trying to be like cool. And I'm like, yeah, I'm actually reading it right now. And he's like, so tell me about it. So I kind of tell him about like Edward and Bella. And he's like, yeah. And then like there's Jacob, right? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, and then doesn't Jacob like something with Bella's baby? And I'm like,
so he was trying to bond with you, but
yes.
it went horribly wrong.
And I'm like, Dad, what? I literally left the house. I'm like, oh my, and he's like, oh, I'm sorry. He's like, did I ruin it? I was like, you did. Or then like in Harry Potter, my brother, because Morgan, oh my God, my cousin Morgan and I, like, we're only 2 years apart, but like we have a lot of the similar interests. So like reading is one of them, but she was always like, she's a crazy fast reader. Like she can read one of the thick Harry Potter books in a day. Jesus. Like she's insane. And she always makes fun of me because she's like, I don't understand. How do you fall asleep when you're reading? It's just too good. And I'm like, I don't know. So she was reading whatever latest Harry Potter book had come out, told my brother and her brother, Jared, because her brother Jared and my brother Josh are like a year apart.
Oh, okay.
And so they're really close too. Told them, and then my brother was pissed at me about something or thought it was hilarious, and he's like, oh, by the way, Dumbledore dies, and then he goes running. And I'm like, you fucking asshole! Why? Like,
that's awesome.
It's just like story of my life. Like people like to take my joy, my happiness.
Oh, Josh. That's hilarious.
Yes, but yeah, so it's like I really enjoyed those books so much, and I just don't know why I never got into more fantasy. I think because like I think fantasy, and I think like I never thought of Harry Potter or like Twilight as fantasy.
Really?
I think more like Lord of the Rings.
Oh, yeah.
You know, or like Star Wars.
Yeah.
And
which that's fantasy too. But
they seem so different to me, and it's kind of like the romance thing where it's like there's different subgenres within fantasy, but I always pictured like, you know, Lord of the Rings, and I'm like, I don't know if I can, like, I don't know if I can handle that, you know? So that's something I want to do. And then I also need to read more romance in 2020.
If you're cold black heart.
Yes, my cold black heart. My cousin, again, Morgan.
You should read this one. There you go.
She is...
Take that.
She loves fantasy, and she loves like fantasy with romance.
Mm-hmm.
And when we did the what's it called, like Jaclebob or Jacleboff, I don't know. I don't know what it's called. It's the Icelandic tradition where on Christmas Eve you do book exchanges. They spend the evening reading and drinking hot cocoa.
Which is perfect.
We're like, okay, well, let's do that. So she emailed me a list of 5 books, and I was supposed to pick 2, and then I emailed her 5 books, and she picks 2. And I laughed so hard because a lot of my Goodreads, like, want to read are not there are books that I want to read, but it's just like, oh, I really like this author. They have a new book coming, but it's not like, like The Silent Patient or something where I'm like, oh my God, I have to read that. Mm-hmm. So I didn't really pick anything off of I don't do a very good job of keeping my Goodreads up to date either. So I was looking at the Goodreads, like, thriller and all their different categories to see, okay, like, what are some of the best books of 2019 that I need to read? Mm-hmm. So I made a list of 5. And I laughed because I'm like, I gotta put one romance on there. Like, I gotta, like, And
you had no idea about romances. You're like, I know no titles of romance.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Not a single one of them was on my radar. Mm-hmm. And so I'm kind of, like, reading through them. And I found one that I thought, like...
could be doable.
Yeah, this might be... Mm-hmm. Because I have no problem with, like, romance-type movies. Mm-hmm. But I think, again, when I think of romance, I think of, like, Harlequin or, like, just, like, all, like, this porno. And,
hot, again, sexy man.
Doesn't bother me, but it's just...
It doesn't float your boat.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I found one that I kind of reminded me, or the synopsis of it, it's called We Met in December. I think it's by Rosie Curtis. And it reminded me of the holiday movie... The Holiday. Mm-hmm. It kind of reminded me of, like, that type of a
storyline.
And it's like, I enjoyed that. So it's like, okay. So I knew
she would get you that one.
That would be the one.
Because you need to read different stuff.
She gets so mad at me because she's like, how can you read all this stuff? Like, this is terrible. Like, you need to read something more lovey-dovey. Like, you need more romance in your life. So, of course, she got that one. But the funny part with that is I was kind of wondering, like, how is she going to choose these other thrillers? Like, is she actually going to read about them? Because even if I talk to her, like, about them, sometimes she's just like, that's awful. Uh-huh. I would have nightmares. So she said she honestly just did, like, Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Moe.
Okay.
And picked
So which one did you get?
Skin and Bone by Carrie Taylor. I had 2 Carrie Taylor books. I've never read, I think it's a her. I've never read any of their books, but they sounded really good.
Okay. I've never heard of that person.
So I got that, and then the We Met in December. I know people, like, make fun of, like, Nicholas Sparks, but it's like, I like his books. I just can't read them back to back to back.
Yeah, God, no.
You know what I mean?
But obviously, there's a market for it because lots of people love it.
Yeah.
And I think not even just romance that you need to read necessarily, but, like, just women's fiction. Just
chick lit.
Not even, I mean, chick lit too, but women's fiction, it doesn't necessarily need to be like that. But, and I mean, you don't need to read anything you don't want to read.
No, and I know. And this is, like, me wanting to, like, branch out. Because, like, there comes a time where it's like you get sick of, like, you know, we pick thriller books, and it's like, this wasn't that thrilling, this wasn't that thrilling. Like I said with the Cozy Mysteries. This wasn't that thrilling. Yeah. And then you have a super thrilling book, and you're like, damn it! And then you're like,
get back in.
Yeah.
And you can't find another one.
Right. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, that's something that I want to branch off into my reading a little bit.
How about historical fiction? Is that anything? There's some good historical fiction.
I do enjoy historical fiction. Mm-hmm. I shouldn't say that. Kristen Hanna had The Nightingale. Mm-hmm. I really enjoyed that one. And then I think there's one that I think made, like, top Goodreads historical fiction last year. Mm-hmm. After Alice or something.
Okay.
I think is what it's called. Something like that. Mm-hmm. I really enjoy historical fiction with, like, World War II and, like, Nazis and...
See, that I do not enjoy that much because it just seems like... I mean, there's tons of historical fiction out there, but it seemed like when I was at the library book club, that was, like, always the one that, like, we would pick, and which was fine, but... Yeah, I needed other things. But one that was really good was All the Light We Cannot See, I think is the title.
Oh, yeah.
And that one was, I enjoyed that one a lot. But, yeah, I look for other historical.
I would like to read other historical. I think the whole World War II is just kind of the one I'm most familiar with.
And there's so many of them out there.
Yeah, and to me, it still fascinates me how that even happens. Mm-hmm. And I think it's just interesting. Like, The Nightingale was so well done by Kristen Hanna. And to give you a different insight into, you know,
into
that era.
Another author that's good that is he's a thriller, but it's historical, is Steve Berry, and he so they're more like action-packed like Jack Reacher type novels, but he spends tons of time researching whatever he is going to be talking about. So most of it is true. Obviously, he needs to add a little bit of fiction to help the story flow.
Right.
But he might actually be someone that you would enjoy. It's not historical fiction, but it's more thrilling, but yet it's historical. So maybe that could be like another type of subgenre you could try. And
yeah, but overall, I mean, I'm really hoping, I don't want to say 2019 was a bad year of thrillers for me, but it's just, there were so many books that I think I went into like kind of high expectations that, oh, this is going to be really good, or based off of the synopsis, it sounds so good, and then was disappointed. Yeah. So I'm hoping overloaded with so many good books that like I can't handle it.
Yeah, you're like, oh my god, it's another great one. Ah.
Yeah, so
yeah, we shall see. It'll be here in a couple days, and yeah. Oh, another thing that might help you read more books in 2020. One of the 5 suggestions I had was like when you sit down to read a book, put enough time aside so you can read at least like the first 40 to 50 pages so you can like really get into it.
Yeah. And that I think is a good thing. That is a very good idea, because for me, a lot of times my reading during the week is like
10 minutes before bed.
Yes.
You're like
going to bed now. Before bed.
Yeah.
And I'm laying there and it's obviously not super exciting. I'm tired and I fall asleep. Where
if at 7 o'clock you are like, okay, it's time to read for an hour. Yeah. And then you read for an hour
and I can get a good like start and like you said, kind of start getting into the meat and potatoes of the book where things start happening. So
exactly.
So
yay, 2020. Very excited.
Yeah. So let us know what your top books were, and obviously some of the books that we talked about we have episodes on, which we mentioned. So check those out. Like, subscribe, and we hope you come back in 2020.
Bye.
Bye.